Good morning. Masechet Pesachim Daf Tet Zayin 16. We're talking today about fluids and defining them in terms of their impurity. So what we're going to see is two Baraitot, and then explaining them, a machloket between Shmuel and Rav. And then we're going to see 7 challenges against Rav and only 1 against Shmuel. But don't worry, Rav will hold his own and be able to respond to each of the challenges. All right, let's talk about the topic a little. We're talking about liquids and their status about tumah. Now, what do we know for sure about liquids? Torah says quite explicitly that liquids act as a catalyst. If I have grain and it's attached to the ground, anything attached to the ground does not become tameh. But once it's detached, then that grain needs to get wet first in order to be able to receive tumah. So in other words, while it's dry, even if something touches it, still okay. When it becomes wet, now it's ready. Kind of the liquid can now act as a buffer to transmit. Kind of like the way if you have dirty shoes but they're dry, then they don't track mud all over. But if they're wet, then the mud is going to go all over the place in your house. So liquids act as a catalyst, that's for sure. What kinds of liquids do that? There are 7 types. This is the list of them. Wine, devash, honey, maybe date honey, shem oil, halav, milk, taldu, blood, and water. The acronym for this is Yad, Shachat, Dam. That's how you can remember it. We're going to be talking about water and also blood a lot today. Exactly which blood that will make something ready, prepare it. It's called huchshar. Make it available, able to receive tumah. Okay, so liquids act as a catalyst and they make something prepared to receive tumah. That's for sure, everyone agrees. The question is, how about the liquids themselves? Can the liquids themselves become tameh, acquire tumah? And if they can they transmit tumah to other items? So in the end, we're going to say yes, but that's mostly derabanan. On the deoraita level, a lot of the opinions we're going to see today say no. Let's try to think conceptually. Why would that be? Why should liquids be different from anything else? I think the idea behind all of this is that if you have a person or a vessel or a piece of meat, these are objects. And as objects, they hold their own. And so therefore, they come into contact with corpse, impurity, other things. So they have a definition of tumah and they can transmit it to other things. Liquids, however, are hard to define. They take the shape of their vessel. You pour them out and they're not around anymore. You can't quite pin them down. And that's the reason why liquids are less susceptible to receiving and transferring tumah to other items. That seems to be the conceptual basis for this discussion. Okay, now we'll get right into the sources, and we're going to see one Baraita of Rabbi Meir. We saw him. This is what we saw yesterday. Last thing we ended off on is that liquids are impure deoraita. They can become impure deoraita, and they transmit tumah to others derabanan. And this says Rabbi Eleazar agrees to that. But we're going to see a second Baraita which seems more lenient, where the same Rabbi Eleazar says liquids have no impurity at all. They cannot even receive tumah. And we're going to see Yose ben Yoezer testifies about something in the Bet HaMikdash the same way. So we have a bit of a contradiction here between Rabbi Eleazar here and Rabbi Eleazar here, and we're going to try to resolve it. Okay, let's go right into the sources here. The Baraita that we saw yesterday was talking about safek. So safek derabanan lekula. Safek mashkin li tameh. If you have liquid and you're not sure if it itself is tameh, then it is tameh. That means midoraita, liquids can receive tumah. Lit tameh acherim tahor. But can it transfer tumah to others? Safek, no. So now that means that it's derabanan. That's what Rabbi Meir says. V'chen haya Rabbi Eleazar omer kidvarav. So it's clear that Rabbi Eleazar agrees with his words. And notice that this is in plural. All right, that's the basic opinion. There are more stringent opinions, but they're not relevant for us today. So we'll go right to the question. Besavar Rabbi Eleazar mashkin itlehu tumah ba'olam. Is that true that Rabbi Eleazar thinks that liquids can become impure? We have a second baraita. V'hatanya Rabbi Eleazar omer en tumam lemashkin kol ikad. That seems pretty clear. There is no impurity for liquids at all. Zero. Teda שהרי העיד יוסי בן יועזר איש שרדה על אל כמסה דחן ועל משכין בית מטבחיה דחן. This is a fascinating source. Yose ben Yoezer is one of the earliest sages we know of. This is from the first of the Zugot. He was the Nasi. This is way back at the time of the Maccabees. And so, this is like a really early tradition. He's not called rabbi because he is even before the title rabbi was introduced. And he testified about two laws. One is that El Kamsa is a certain kind of grasshopper. This is it. Since it has these horns, antennas, it kind of looks like a goat. So it's looking like that. So it's called the El Kamsa. And he says that this is kosher. Okay, because grasshoppers have a lot of different species, hard to tell. We want to have a tradition which ones we can eat. The word dachan is not so common. It means, it's the same as the word tahor. It means kosher or pure. That this is the plural, dachan. Singular would be dache or dacha. The dalet in Aramaic is often parallel to a zayin in Hebrew, like zahav in Hebrew is dahav in Aramaic. So this is like zacha, zachi, which means pure, clear, kosher, right? So that's we're going to see this word a few times. Dachan simply means tahor. So he said that grasshopper is good. That doesn't concern us right now. Ba'al mashkin bet mitbehaya dachan. And Yose ben Yoezer, who lived during the time of the Bet HaMikdash, in fact, probably during its purification at the hand of the Maccabees. This is perfect for Chanukah. He says that the slaughterhouse, the Bet Mitbach, in the Bet HaMikdash, there was a certain section north of the Mizbeach. That's where they brought all the animals and slaughtered the animals, and there would be the blood would be there and water, a lot of liquids all around. And he says that area is dachan, is pure. You don't have to worry about tumah from that. If there's a nevela or if a dead mouse creeps in or a person, don't worry about it. All the liquids that are produced in the slaughterhouse in that area of the Bet HaMikdash are pure. Now, why are they pure? What does that mean? In the Bet HaMikdash, we know that deoraita laws are applicable. The derabanan laws are not applicable in the Bet HaMikdash because they're gezerot. We don't have to worry that kohanim are going to violate. So, according to this, it means that even on a derabanan level for sure, but if you're saying that all these liquids, the blood of the animals, the water that they use there, all of it is pure, it means he's saying that liquids do not receive or give any impurity. All liquids are tahor. And so that's Yose ben Yoezer says, and Rabbi Eleazar is quoting him saying the same thing. And so now we have a contradiction because Baraita number 1 said that Rabbi Eleazar agrees with Rabbi Meir that liquids can contract impurity, although not transmit deoraita. And here, Rabbi Eleazar agrees with Yose ben Yoezer that liquids do not even contract impurity deoraita. All right, so we're going to try to resolve it. We can resolve it according to Shmuel, but not according to Rav. Hani chali Shmuel damar dachan militame tumat acherim. Aval tumat asman yesh lahen shapir. He says this word dachan, when they said that all these liquids in the Bet HaMikdash are pure, what they meant is that they are pure in terms of giving tumah to others. They do not transmit to others. But can they receive tumah? Yes, they can. So don't read this Baraita quite simply or literally. And so he takes this Baraita and makes it fit with the first one. And so then, good, you have an answer. But Rav insists that we take this second Baraita at face value. And in that case, it would seem that Rabbi Eleazar says no impurity for liquids at all. So let's try to resolve it. It's not going to work. Amarav Nachman bar Yitzchak Ahada. When he says that Rabbi Eleazar agrees here with Rabbi Meir, it says Rabbi Meir said two things: that mashkin, they themselves are tameh, midoraita, but they don't tameh other things. And Rabbi Eleazar says he agrees. Maybe he only agrees with one thing. Maybe he only agrees that they don't transmit to others, but they do receive themselves. But this doesn't work because look, he says vechen, and he also says kidvarav in plural, which means he's agreeing on both counts. And therefore, it's really very difficult to take this first baraita and make it fit with the second. The second stands alone, so we reject it. And so, according to Rav, we are not able to resolve these two baraitot. Instead, he's sticking with the simple reading of the second baraita. Okay, good. Back to our outline. So those are the two baraitot, and that's the opinion of Shmuel and Rav. And so let's review those opinions, because now we're going to go on and give 7 challenges to Rav and 1 challenge to Shmuel. So Shmuel says liquids can become impure deoraita themselves, but they cannot transmit. That's a little stricter. Rav is even more lenient, and he says liquids are all pure deoraita. They cannot receive or give any tumah. So that's the lenient opinion. And we just had a challenge to Rav from a Baraita, number 1. We were not able to solve it. We're going to give a little explanation of their 2 opinions, and then 1 challenge to Shmuel, which is also going to end in the kashya. So we have kashya against kashya. And then we're going to go on with all the rest of the daf will be challenges to Rav, 6 more for a total of 7. And we'll see some nice cases along the way. All right, so here is the explanation. Gufa, let's just analyze this machloket. Rav amar dachan mamash. Right, Rav says absolutely all liquids are pure, tahor. Shmuel amar dachan militameh tumat acherim aval tumat asman yesh lahem. Shmuel is more machmir. He says liquids can have their own deoraita tumah, but they don't give it to anybody else. Right? It's like someone being sick, but they're not contagious. Rav amar dachan mamash kasabar tumat mashkin derabanan. So even Rav would say that liquids can become tameh, but only midrabanan. When the rabbis make a gezerah, they make it for everybody else in the world, but not for the Bet HaMikdash. Umashkin bet mitbechaya lagazur. So they never made a gezerah for the Bet HaMikdash, and that's why Yose ben Yoezer said in the Bet HaMikdash, the slaughterhouse, everything was pure. No have to worry about it. Good. Shmuel amar dachan milimitame tumat acherim. When we said it's pure in that Baraita, that's only talking about transferring to others. But the liquid itself, avat tumat atzman yesh lahem, even on deoraita level. Kasabar tumat mashkin atzman deoraita, the tameh acherim derabanan. This paragraph is a bit repetitive. That the liquid can be itself be tameh deoraita, but can only transmit midrabanan. V'chi gazur banan b'mashkin de'alma, mashkin bet mitbechaya la gazur. When the rabbis made this gezerah that tumah can transfer to others, that was only other places, everywhere else in the world, but not in the Bet HaMikdash. V'chila gazur banan letamuya acharim, aval tumat asman yesh lahem. When the rabbis did not make this gezerah, that was only regarding others, but their own tumah is deoraita, so that remains true. Okay, so all that was kind of obvious, but it explicates it, so now we're clear. Amar le Rav Huna bar Chinana libre. This rabbi tells his son, Ki ailat lekamed Rav Papa ramile. Listen, you're on your way, you're traveling, you're going to see Rav Papa. Please ask him this question when you see him. Mi amar Shmuel dachan militame tumat acherim aval tumat asman yesh lahen keri kan v'habasar asher yiga bechol tameh lo yachel. Is it really true that Shmuel said that dachan, purity, that liquid is pure regarding other things, but it itself is tameh? We have a pasuk in Vayikra that says habasar asher yiga bechol tameh lo yachel, meat that touches anything tameh, that meat cannot be eaten. What's the point? That anything that is tameh, if it touches meat, will cause the meat to be tameh. In other words, anything that itself is tameh causes tumah to other things. That's what this pasuk says. And now you're giving me an example of liquid that is tameh. Well, then if meat touches it, the meat should become tameh. That's what the pasuk says. How can you have something that is tameh but doesn't transfer tumah? Okay, good question. So, Amar Rav Shesha bered Rav Idi midei dehava arbe'i bakodesh. It's not clear if he ever goes makes the trip and asks Rav Papa. Another rabbi chimes in and says, "What? I have an answer. This is like the fourth level tumah." Right? If you have something that touches something, right, to the fourth level, that's the lowest level. Only applies to Hekdesh. And that Hekdesh, which touched something, 4 levels down, is so weak, right, that it cannot give tumah to anything else. And so here you go. Here is something that is itself tameh. It's the fourth level, it's a rivi'i, but it cannot transfer tumah to anything else. So you do have such a thing. So just like that's an exception to this pasuk, so too my exception is also okay. But we reject this like kashya. No, that is not called tameh. We call that pasul, right? When something is itself tameh but cannot get transferred to anything else. And this water is called tameh, so it's not quite the same. So we leave it as a kashya. Okay, I think it wouldn't be too difficult to figure out an answer that this is saying that meat that touches anything that is impure and transfers impurity becomes impure, but there are some things that don't. Okay, but anyway, that was the one question on Shmuel, his intention with this pasuk in Vayikra chapter 7.
Did the son never get to Rav Papa? We don't have the response?
We don't know. We don't know if he went to, maybe he didn't need to. This other rabbi came and said, I have an answer. It wasn't a good answer. So we're still waiting to hear back from Rav Papa. Tashema. Bechol mashkeh asher yishate bechol keli yitma. Ma'itma hichshir. All right, we have a pasuk here. This is a question on Rav. It says, any liquid that is drunk, the yishate, any liquid that can be drunk, meaning maybe not just any liquid, but only a drinkable one. Bechol keli yitma. If it goes into a vessel, it becomes impure. So there you go, right? If I take some liquid and pour it into an impure bowl, so the liquid becomes tameh. Rav, you said all liquids can never become tameh. Here it is, pasuk deoraita, right? So we answer, ma'itma. What does it mean, yitma? Not that the liquid will become tameh, but rather hichshir. It means the bowl will become susceptible to tumah. It means that once it's wet, if something else then touches the bowl, then it becomes tameh. That's what yitma means. It means will in the future have the possibility of becoming tameh. All right, hichshir, is that really good reading? The beginning of that pasuk, actually, we already learned that from the beginning of the same pasuk. Mikol ha'ochel asher ya'achel. If you want to see the pasuk inside, I have it here, right? So the pasuk says, Mikol ha'ochel asher ya'achel, anything that's food, that's edible, asher yavo alav mayim, if water comes upon it, yitma. That becomes tameh. Now, I mean, you could interpret this meaning water that is tameh touches the food and makes the food tameh, but nobody reads it like that. Instead, we're reading it as if water falls on food, regular water, tahor water, falls on food, then the food becomes mukhshar, right? It becomes susceptible to accepting tumah, yitma, right? So the first half teaches us that water makes food susceptible to tumah. So I already know that. And now you just told me I have to interpret the second half the same way. Any drinkable water in a kli doesn't mean that the water becomes tameh or that the kli becomes tameh, but rather the kli becomes susceptible to tumah. So now the whole pasuk is talking about hechsher, but if so, it's redundant because the first half and the second half are teaching the same thing. So he's going to answer that. He says, Chad betlushin, v'chad b'mechubarin. It's talking about different kinds of water. Water that is mechubarin means water that's in its source. It's in a puddle or a well where it was naturally. So I have to learn that. And tilushin is drawn water. And so I need a pasuk for both. I have to know that both drawn water and water in its natural state, both will cause food to become susceptible to tumah if they become wet with those kinds of water. Now, why would you think there's a difference between one type of water and the next? We know that there's a difference in water in terms of a mikveh. If you want to make something kasher, it has to be has to be natural water and not drawn water. But how about for this? Why should there be a difference? Usrichi, I do need both. When I draw water, I'm giving it importance. I'm saying, oh, this water is some water that I want. And because it's water that I want and I drew it, therefore, if I pour it on grapes, then the grapes become susceptible to tumah. But maybe water that's just there in the puddle outside, I don't care about that water. I didn't make it important. And so if it becomes wet by that water, maybe you'd say it does not make it susceptible to tumah. And the other way around, maybe water is significant when it's in its natural state. And so if the grapes fall into that well, so then see, it's natural water like a mikveh, and that makes it susceptible to tumah. But if I remove it from its natural state, maybe that is a downgrade, and that water is not important. So I have to learn both ways. Okay, so we resolved that question. Next one, Tashema, also question on Rav. Ach ma'ayan ubor mikveh mayim yeh tahor. Ma yeh tahor mitum atom. So another pasuk, also in Vayikra, right after that, this one we just saw, says that any water that's collected in a spring or a cistern will be pure. So it sounds like that other waters can become tameh, but this water is tahor. In other words, you can never make a mikveh tameh, right? Even if something tameh goes in it, that water is tahor, right? But that we can infer from that if it's not a mikveh, if it's just a cup of water, then that could become tameh, right? And no, tahor mitumato. Now, what this pasuk is saying is that anything that goes into the mikveh, if it was tameh, becomes tahor. That's what it's teaching, right? A tameh person jumps into the spring, then they will become tahor. That's what it is. But otherwise, other water itself, regular water in a cup cannot make me tahor, but it itself cannot become tameh. Okay. So let's see what happens. Utulushin mi machshirin. Now we resolved that, but we want to go back a second to this question of the water that's in place and water that's detached. Right? We explained why we need both halves of the pasuk. Then we went to Vayikra, but now we're going to go back to this detached question, and we're going to say, does water that's detached really prepare other things if they get wet? We're going to say yes, they do, and compare it to blood. So non-sacred lifeblood also does. Let me explain these terms. Lifeblood is the blood that jets out right when you slaughter an animal. Slaughter an animal and it's alive, and that blood that comes out as it's dying, that's the lifeblood. That's the most important blood. That's the one that you need to collect into a bowl and if you want to sprinkle it on the mizbeach, and that's the most important. And the rest of the blood that comes out later, just drips out later as you're preparing the meat and cutting it, that is lesser status. That's called squeezed blood. Okay, so let's see the status of these different bloods. Tlushin mimachshirin, you just told me that water that is drawn, if it makes my grapes wet, then the grapes will be susceptible to tumah. Is that true? Rabbi Yose b'Rabbi Chanina. Mashkin bet mitbechaya lo dayan shehen dachan ela she'en machshirin. Okay, Rabbi Yose, this Rabbi Yose Bachina says something further. The liquids in the slaughterhouse, not only are they pure, they don't give impurity, they don't receive impurity. They are so pure that they don't even make something mukhshar susceptible to tumah. If water that's used or liquids, blood that's used in the Bet HaMikdash falls on grapes, those grapes are still not susceptible to tumah. Okay, so I think this is the most extreme, most lenient opinion we've seen. So what does that mean? You see that according to this, seems to be okay. Even blood that's water, even water that was drawn will not make something hukhshad. And this is a question on Rav, because Rav said that the pasuk in Vayikra is talking about water and says yitma. Oh, that's talking about making it mukhshad. But according to this, water in the Bet HaMikdash does not make anything mukhshad. So how are you going to deal with that? So tirgema al dam. So he says, no, that statement over here is referring. This one is referring to blood. Blood that's in the slaughterhouse in the Bet HaMikdash will not make anything tameh, even if it falls on the grapes. How do we know that blood of the sacrificial blood does not make things susceptible to tumah? שנאמר על הארץ תשפכנו כמים, דם שנשפך כמים מכשיר, דם שאינו נשפך כמים אינו מכשיר. Pasuk in Devarim is talking about non-sacrificial animals, right? It says there that since you might live far away, you can't bring every time you want a steak that you can bring it to the Bet HaMikdash, so you can slaughter wherever you are. If you live in Haifa, you slaughter it normally, and whatever blood comes out, you have to pour it on the ground like water. So that blood that is poured out like water, that is machshir because it's treated like water. So therefore, if I live in Haifa and I do shechita, the lifeblood that comes out, if that needs to be poured out like water, and therefore is treated like water, if that touches my grapes, the grapes are now susceptible to tumah. But in the Bet HaMikdash, I don't pour out that blood on the floor. That blood I collect in a vessel. And so, since that is not like water, eno machshir, that special blood, the lifeblood in the Bet HaMikdash, has a special status and does not make anything tameh. That's what Rabbi Yose Rabbi Chanina was talking about. Question on that. But the blood that comes out later, after the first jet, the rest of the blood that's in the animal that eventually some of it comes out, that we do pour on the floor, even in the Bet HaMikdash. So there you go. There's Bet HaMikdash blood that is machshir, that goes against Rabbi Yose's general statement. Is lo machshir. Actually, the blood that comes out after, not the original blood, but only blood that's stuck in the animal that comes out later, is not machshir. It's not considered one of those 7 liquids. So when you have that list of 7 liquids and it says blood, that blood that causes something to be machshir is only the initial life blood, but not blood that comes up after. So not like just the juice or gravy of animal. If it's just made out of blood that was there before, that does not make something machshir litumah. Okay, good. And we know this from the following proof. Ki belah mineh Rabbi Shmuel bar Ami, Damelach Hamana rak chazak lebatiach chol hadam, ki hadam hu hanafesh. דם שהנפש יוסע בו, קרוי דם. דם שאין הנפש יוסע בו, אין קרוי דם. Right, this severe prohibition not to eat blood is because the blood is the life force. Right, this was first introduced after Noah. Right, beforehand, Adam HaRishon had to be all vegetarian. Nobody, even animals, were herbivorous. But afterwards, Hashem says, okay, you can eat animals, but respect its life and don't eat the life blood. So why don't eat the blood? Because the blood is its life. So which blood is its life? Not all of it, but only the blood that first comes out when it's slaughtered as it's dying. That's its life blood. So that's the one that has the official name of dam, and that's the one that if it falls on grapes or anything, any food, then the food is susceptible to tumah. Something else then touches it. But the rest of the blood that comes out later is not in this category. And so we were able to therefore solve this question. And so it's true, according to the Yose, right? Any liquids in the Bet HaMikdash, water, and any blood there, it does not make anything susceptible to tumah. Any blood, because the blood that comes out first for a korban is special, collected in a bowl, doesn't go out in water. Doesn't go down on the floor, and any other blood that comes out later is not considered blood and not in the definition of dam hanefesh. All right, good. So those are the 3 challenges. We have 4 more challenges to Rav. Tashema dam shenitma uzrako beshogeg hursa bemezid lo hursa. Okay, so this Baraita says that, let's say I have blood that became tameh. So here it is, blood that can become tameh. All right, and it was sprinkled onto the altar. If it was by mistake, then the korban is still acceptable. If it was on purpose, the Kohen did it on purpose, then the korban is not acceptable. So this is a question on Rav. Rav said that liquids cannot become impure, but this is talking about a case of blood that is impure. So how could this be? The answer is derabanan. This blood is not impure deoraita. Never. No liquids can be impure deoraita, but it does have a derabanan status. And although Rabbi Yose, right, that the ancient sage said that there's no derabanans, that we don't apply any of that in the Bet HaMikdash, this statement must be arguing on Rabbi Yose ibn Yoezer, and thinks that there is a derabanan status. This derabanan status of liquids does apply in the Bet HaMikdash and will be a problem if it's sprinkled on the altar. So it doesn't fully answer that entire Baraita, but Rav could interpret at least this Baraita in a way that conforms with his opinion that liquids do not receive tumah at all mid-deoraita. Okay, very similar question and similar answer. Tashema alma hesis miraseh, right? The sis, the frontlet that the Kohen Gadol wears, its purpose is to make things that sometimes there's problems that creep up in the Bet HaMikdash, and the seats will atone for those things and make them acceptable if they weren't acceptable. So what kinds of things can the seats help out with? Kind of like an extra credit. Al hadam val habasar val hacheleb shenitma ben shogeg ben bemezid ben beones ben berason ben beachid ben besibur. Those Mishnah comes and says that the seats will give some extra, make it acceptable regarding blood. That's one we need, and also meat and prohibited fat. Any of those things that became tameh, whether by mistake or on purpose, whether by force or willingly, whether it was an individual offering or a communal offering. In all those cases, blood that became tameh will be acceptable. So there you go. Blood can become tameh. The question on Rav, same answer. Midrabanan udolok Yose ben Yoezer ish sereda. That this blood is talking about is that became only tameh midrabanan, but no liquids can become tameh deoraita. And it's true, however, that there was some level of impurity of derabanan that could come up in the Bet HaMikdash. Good. Second to last question. Tashema v'nasa Aaron et avon hakodashim. V'chi eze avon hu noseh. So when Aaron is going to wear this frontlet, it will bear the sin of the kodashim. So what kind of sin is it going to bear? Im avon pigul, hare kevan nemar lo yeraseh. Im avon notar, hare kevan nemar lo yechashev. So if someone brings a sacrifice with the wrong intention, it's unedible. You have to burn that sacrifice. So lo yeraseh, it's not acceptable. So even if he's wearing the seats, it doesn't help with pigul. So the pasuk can't be talking about that. If it's notar, overdue, you didn't eat it in time, and now it's too late. The seats doesn't help with that either. So what does the seats actually help with? Rather, what the seats helps is in a case where, let's say, most of the congregation is tameh, and they have to bring a korban sibur. This is actually very relevant to today, right? Nowadays, why don't we have korbanot today? So we say because we're all tameh met and we don't have a para aduma, so we can't become tahor. But actually, this is not true. Technically, according to this, if we wanted to bring korban pesach, then even though we're all tameh lamet, but if if a few people are tameh lamet, they have to wait for pesach shani. But if everybody's tameh lamet, then the seats helps out in that case, right? And says hutra tumah hutra betzibur. A communal offering can be brought and bit tumah. Now,
vidui gadol. It's like vidui gadol. Would you look in that same respect or not really?
Right. It's everybody together, exactly. Yeah. So this works on a communal level. And so now what specifically is going to become tameh that will be a problem? My love, tumat dam. We're going to bring the korban pesach. The kohen's going to collect the blood for us. It's going to be tameh because we're all tameh. The kohanim are also tameh. He's going to sprinkle that tameh blood on the mizbeach, and yet it should be okay because we have the seats. So there you go. There can be blood that is tameh, right? So this is a disproof against Rav, who said that blood cannot become tameh. Rav Papa, lo tumat kemasim. No, there's some other things that also will be offered. So if you bring a mincha offering, some mincha offerings are also communal offering, and there the equivalent of the blood is the kohen taking part of the flour and putting it on the mizbeach. If that is tameh, then this pasuk says the seats will help out and say you don't have to worry about it. But it's not talking about the blood because blood itself never becomes tameh. And so Rav is able to reconcile his opinion with that halacha. Okay, and now last question. Last question is very interesting. It comes from a fascinating couple of pisukim from Haggai. It's worth looking at them inside beforehand. So Haggai, one of the last of the Nevi'im, he lived around 520, and this actually is in the year 518 BCE. And he is encouraging everyone to build the second Bet HaMikdash. And on the 24th of the Tishii, meaning of Kislev, right? That's right around now. A couple of days will be the 24th of Kislev. So he's doing this, but in the year 518. This is the year when the foundations of the Bet HaMikdash were already finished, and now he's encouraging them to keep going and do a good job. And Haggai gathers the Kohanim, and he asks them two questions. He's testing their halachic knowledge, it seems. And he says, "En yisa ish besar kodesh bichnaf bigdo." Let's say Kohen is holding on to holy meat, sacrificial meat, in his cloak. It seems that that would be the way that they would hold on to it, especially if they're wearing their special priestly robes. And so that will be protected. And then v'naga bichnafo el halechem ve'el hanazir el hanazid ve'el hayayin ve'el hashemen ve'el kol ma'achal hayikdash. So he's holding something that is holy. If with his, with the other part of his garment, he touches some bread or soup or wine or oil or some food, does the holiness of the sacrifice transfer to that other item? And Vayanuk HaKohanim Vayomeru Lo, no, holiness does not transfer from one thing to another, right? If Sefer Torah is holy, if Sefer Torah touches something, touches an apple, does the apple become holy? No. And then second question, Vayomer Haggai, imigat temeh nefesh bechol ele hayitma. How about if someone who is tameh, a person who's tameh, for whatever reason, if he touches any of these items, the food, the soup, the drink, the wine, the oil, does that become tameh? And yes, it does become tameh. And so then he says, says these people, they are all tameh. I think that the peshat of this is that holiness is not contagious, but tumah is contagious. Kind of the way, like for us, the disease is contagious. Health is not contagious. If you're near a healthy person, you're not going to get healthy yourself. Just by being in the gym, it doesn't do anything if you're not working out. Okay, so I think he's giving a moral lesson about the job that the Kohanim have to do. But there are many, many interpretations of this. We're going to see some of them. And right now, let's see how the Gemara applies. It's asking from the first pasuk, not from the second one. Let's see how they ask. Tashema, hen yisa ish besar kodesh bichnaf bigdo v'naga bichnafo el alechem nazim l'yayim l'Hashem v'kol ma'achal ha'yikdash rukanim lo yikdash. The Gemara has lo yikdash. The pasuk doesn't have the word yikdash. Ve'amar Rav ishtabash kahaneh. Rav said about that the Kohanim got the answer wrong. Okay, so what's going on? I'm going to follow a simple understanding of Rav Haiga on here, that their question was referring to consecrated meat. And the question is, if it comes into contact with tameh, oil, or stew, or liquids that are tameh, can it become tameh? And they said no. And then Rav said they're wrong. The correct answer was yes. In other words, according to this, Rav admits that tameh or liquids can, if it touches meat, can make the meat tameh. So liquids can be tameh, and they can transfer tumah to other items, right? According to this, what Rav just said, he said it in a different context, but this is a self-contradiction of Rav. Okay, we have his answer will be as follows: Midehu ta'ama ella lerav. Rav mashke bet mitbehaya tane. Aval mashke be mitbehaya mitameh. Oh, so Rav, the such question is only for Rav. Rav only said his halacha regarding the liquids of the bet mitbahaya. He was okay. Rav agrees that the liquids in the chamber of the altar, right, which is a different area, they can become impure. Only the ones that were in the slaughterhouse cannot. So, in other words, as follows: the halacha before that he was quoting from Yose ben Yoezer, that's on the floor in the actual place where they do all the slaughtering. The animals there's no tumah status applies to all of those liquids. But in other areas, the ones that they're actually going to bring up to the mizbeach, those can receive tumah, and therefore those have to be in a state of tumah. That's what the Kohen, that's what Chagai was asking about, and that's why the Kohanim in that case got it wrong. But that has nothing to do with this entire discussion we've had before. Our entire discussion till this point, was only about the bet mitbach, the slaughterhouse. That is a special area where liquids have no tumah and tahara. And that answers the last and the final last question. And tomorrow we'll see some more discussion about those Pesukim from Chagai. Baruch Adonai.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you very much.